All right. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are getting ready for another presentation right here in the Philips Connected Care Forum. We'd love to have you join us. We have a great one for you here. Some of you might have heard me talking about this a little bit earlier, but we have one of the leading patient advocates here with us. You might know him from his blog. We're going to introduce him in just a second. And oh, did I get to this one? Let's see. What are we doing here? I was expecting a looping slide here. Is that the one? Oops. All right. Here, we'll do this for just 1 second. Then let me know when we're queued up on that. It's well-oiled machinery, Dave. Don't worry. It'll all be just smooth. All right. 1 moment, please. Yeah. All righty. That's what we were looking for. All right. Thanks, kids. This lets us know we're about ready to do a presentation. And we've got open space. We'd love to have you join us. If you're passing by, feel free to have a seat. Dave always does a fantastic job, and we're very lucky to have him with us. He does travel all over the world as a patient care advocate, and he'll be speaking here in just a moment. We have a schedule over here that shows all of our topics. So we have a range, of course, of different prominent advocates and speakers in the area, but we also have a lot of our senior Philips leadership here this week. We have a lot of our key partners, so there's really a bunch of great information for you to get here today. So we hope that you'll come back and check out some of those sessions. We also have a job fair that we're doing over in the career fair. So if you're interested in maybe looking for an opportunity with Philips, we'd love to talk to you, and I'll mention a little more about that afterwards. But that's basically it. So if you're in the area, I still have some space available. Your timing is perfect, and we'll begin. So welcome to the Philips Connected Health Forum. I'm Paul Traynor, and I'm your host. As I said, between now and Wednesday, we have exciting sessions with outstanding speakers on topics ranging from population health and care coordination to advanced analytics and clinical informatics, all right here in the forum, starting at the top of every hour all week long. The schedule is right over there with the list of topics, so be sure to grab that. But we're about to start a very special session right now. Dave DeBronkart, known on the internet as ePatient Dave, is one of the world's leading advocates for patient engagement. After beating stage 4 kidney cancer in 2007, Dave became a blogger, a health policy advisor, and an international keynote speaker. Today, he's the best-known spokesman for the patient engagement movement, attending nearly 300 conferences and policy meetings a year internationally, including in Washington, where he's testified and had his testimony added to the medical record. He's a co-founder and current co-chair of the Society of Participatory Medicine. ePatient Dave's been in Time Magazine, U.S. News, USA Today, Wired, MIT Technology Review, and the Health Leaders cover story, Patients of the Future. Dave is also the author of the highly rated Let Patients Help, a patient engagement handbook, and his TED Talk, Let Patients Help, went viral and for years was one of the top half of TED Talks of all time, right? Over 500,000 views. It's been subtitled in 26 languages, indicating the global appeal of this message. And in 2012, the Library of Medicine announced it was capturing his blog and its History of Medicine division. So what a difference one person can make. We're very excited to have him with us now. Dave DeBronkart, ladies and gentlemen, welcome ePatient Dave.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I have no idea how anybody can memorize that much stuff about somebody else. That's funny. I've been talking about health data for 8 years now, and I have to tell you, I come at my point here is that things are shifting. There is a palpable shift this year that I have not seen at other years of HIMSS or other conferences, and that is that the validity of patients being involved in their care is palpably different now. It is accepted now in ways that were not true 5 years ago. And the other thing is that tools are becoming available now to help you. Now, first thing, I am not going to be talking about patients as the people who are out there on International Drive, because the time has come, and I'm not kidding, the time has come for us all to think about it firsthand. It's everybody's issue. And I myself am nothing but a routine data geek. I worked with data in my day job for all my life. I was the admin for the Salesforce system at the last company I worked at, which was a cloud software company. You know, I understand data from the perspective of getting my hands dirty on it, grabbing a bunch of it, moving it over here, and then going, yuck, this stuff's no good. Right, and then going back and fixing the workflow and so on. And when I started getting involved in my medical record and health data back in 2009, I discovered that a very large part of health IT hadn't yet figured out how to make sure the data was clean, much less making sure that when it shows up at the other end of a pipe, it has the same information content that it had supposedly at the sending end. And I'm here to talk today about the growing patient movement, which is not those other people out there. It includes you. Please, please, I'll say more about this. You will see there are about a dozen people at the conference this week who are wearing a jacket like this. This woman is the one who painted it. She started this whole, what she calls the walking gallery of healthcare. There are almost 500 of these coats. This is the phone call where she met me because her husband was dying of kidney cancer, which I had just escaped a couple of years ago. Consider she had been to 3 bad hospitals in Washington, D.C., and they had not found what they needed to know. And then a mutual friend bumped into her at the store where she worked, and she said, "Oh my God, kidney cancer, you need to meet e-patient Dave." And that night we were talking on the phone because of Twitter. All right, we met on Twitter, and the next day she was talking to my oncologist in Boston. There is a form of liquidity of information being able to move around without centralized control that was not possible 10 years ago. And it changes what's possible in healthcare, but not if you don't know it. Well, all right, I'm still on the title slide. Well, Warner Slack may be well known. He's certainly well known in the EMEA world, but he's one of the real gods of informatics from way, way back. And when he had come out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison late in the 1960s, he became a pioneer of the informatics world and started talking about this line that's extremely well quoted these days. He and his colleague Charlie Safran have said it in front of congressional committees and so on. And it raises a real question here. Sometimes people say this and they just say, patients are an underused resource in healthcare. Well, I'll tell you, 10 years ago last month, January 2007, I had a routine shoulder x-ray that totally by dumb luck discovered a spot in my lung. And that lung turned out to be kidney cancer. And I had metastases eventually from my leg. My thigh bone eventually broke all the way up to my skull. And to make a long story short that you can read on my website if you want to, it turned out that the best available evidence said my median survival from diagnosis was 24 weeks, 5.5 months from diagnosis. That was in January. The way it unfolded, but by the end of July, my treatment had ended and I had beaten the disease. And an important part of that story, which I won't go into in depth here, is I did not sit on my butt and expect everything to come to me. In addition to partnering with great doctors, all right, I did everything I could to connect with other patients and bring information to the case. The proof of the pudding on this is that today, my oncologist actually said in 2013 in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, I don't know if you could have survived, if you could have tolerated enough medicine if you hadn't been so involved. So I'm saying, it used to be 2 generations ago that the only way to get great medical information was to know the right people. Now that still helps, but it's not your only chance anymore. I bring this up at this point because I don't assert who needs doctors. I know there are some people who say that. I think that's ridiculous. I want the best doctors in the world, but I also want to be allowed to help. So when somebody keeps me or keeps you away from our medical record, I assert that the person who has the most at stake is being disempowered by keeping them away from information they might be able to use. So the question comes up, what was Dr. Slack talking about? Mind you, it's funny. I dug out some other speaker at a conference in Iowa a few years ago. An amazing thing about being a healthcare conference speaker is that you bump into lots of other speakers. And somebody had this slide of Warner Slack in the Toledo, Ohio newspaper in 1971, I think it was. And he was saying that the reporter had asked, will computers ever replace doctors? And he said, any doctor who can be replaced with a computer should be. But there's no way that I would want my doctor, Danny Sands, to be replaced with one. Now, this is what I've been saying. Patient is not a third-person word. And I really mean this for each of you individually. It is, I've seen in the looks of audiences, I've had over 500 speeches in 15 countries now. If you think about patients as somebody else, you think about it one way. They're the people you're there to serve. But when it hits home, and after 10 years of doing this, I've had people come to me saying, I heard you talk a couple years ago, and we just got news like this. All right, your time will come, and you will experience all of this differently. I encourage you, don't just think about it as yourself, because I've seen that people tend to think, well, I'll get by, I'll do the best I can. But when it's your kid, your grandchild, your mother, who all of a sudden has a crisis, or something goes wrong that could have been prevented, you experience it differently. And, the thing about this is, the time to learn how to use a fire extinguisher is not when the fire breaks out. The time to learn how to swim is not when you fall off a boat. So start getting involved. One of the things you find is and I mean you getting your data from all your providers and trying to combine it. Because one of the things you find is it's not that easy to get all the data out. And then another thing you find is, as Geisinger found, it was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal Health section a couple of years ago, 80% of charts contain a mistake. Some of them are not important. And a pre-cancer chest x-ray that I had back in 2003 identified me as a 53-year-old woman. How did that get in there? It had a male name on the chart, but the radiologist, 53-year-old woman. On the other hand, when my mother had a hip replacement several years ago, everything went fine in the hospital. But when she was discharged to rehab, the records were not exchanged electronically. They got printed out and then transcribed. And her thyroid condition was copied over backwards. Now, my point here, consider how this would normally play out. She has the opposite condition that most older women have if they have a thyroid problem. So it's understandable that the person who copied it got it wrong. I used to work in the typesetting industry, and you know what happens when people type a lot of information? Typos. All right? Well, so the best doctor in the world could have looked at the chart, all right, and prescribed the opposite medicine that was needed and done harm. Now, to us as data geeks, it's one mistake in the data. We have less than 1 in 1,000 data errors. Each one can be catastrophic. Now, in the event, my super activated sisters, I call them the alpha sisters in the family, they were there and said, could we look at the data? And the rehab place said, sure. And they found the mistake and fixed it. So there you have patient and family engagement, demonstrably, identifiably improving data quality, avoiding a medical error at no cost. Please go thou and enable this. Your time will come. Always think how you'll feel when it's your child or your parent whose life is at stake. Guaranteed your time will come when it will be you. This is the thing. So I'm a business person, okay? I spent my whole life in industry, particularly in the graphic arts. I gave speeches at trade shows long before HIMSS existed as an organization. And I understand the ecosystem of business. But what drives me nuts is when I started giving talks at healthcare conferences, I got on mailing lists, right? So I got on a mailing list, please come to the blah, blah, blah summit involving all stakeholders. All stakeholders. Well, so there were government people, industry people, nonprofits, hospital, insurance, and so on. The ultimate stakeholder, you know what that word means? Who has more at stake in how it works out? The ultimate stakeholder is the sick person. and their family. But because the industry in general hasn't, this is all praise to Philips, they have patients speaking, from the patient's perspective. Yet we're often excluded from talks with all stakeholders. You may have heard, by the way, just a side note, I don't have a slide on this, but there's a woman named Sharon Terry, who's the CEO of the Genetic Alliance, very deeply involved in precision medicine. You know what they're doing? She and her organization, the patients are dreaming up a clinical trial, and they're shopping around for researchers to do it for them. How's that for upside down? I love it. Well, they're the ones who care how well it's going to work out. Here's why information is so important, and this is a line from my little book. People perform better when they're informed better. There's a paradox here. People who are accustomed to seeing clueless patients who have never been involved in anything medical will say, well, look, I'm not going to give patients this information. They won't know what to do with it. It's perverse to keep people in the dark and then call them ignorant, right? Healthcare truly is all about knowledge. Knowledge is power. When I say this is cultural, I don't just mean in the medical culture. Once upon a time, when I was in high school, back in the Proterozoic era or something, there were no girls' sports in high school. And you know why there were no girls' sports? It's because obviously girls aren't athletic. Well, then Title IX was passed, the U.S. law saying that half of sports funding has to go to girls. And all of a sudden, my daughter's running her 5th Boston Marathon this year. And it's funny because Catherine Schweitzer, the woman who first broke into a Boston Marathon before Title IX was passed, there's this great photo of this race organizer going in there and trying to throw her out because she had no business running a marathon. Well, so this is what's happening in the patient movement. As patients are getting access to information and are able to express themselves, we're discovering that good things can happen. And so now, I'm beginning to do lectures at medical schools. At Dartmouth last month, I gave my first lecture there. For the first time, this class of medical students said, first time anybody said it to me, we know patients can find good information on the internet. We don't need to be persuaded about that. There we go, the early signs. Nobody, patient or clinician, can possibly perform to the top of their ability if they don't have the information. And it is a mistake to keep them in the dark and then say they're ignorant. When a patient is in trouble, achieving potential matters. So go back to Warner Slack. He said patients are the most underused resource. Now, I'm not saying that every patient is a brilliant person. And my proof of this is good formal logic. Patients are people. Some people are idiots. It follows that some patients are idiots. And that is no reason at all to keep all patients out of the loop. Because where a patient, remember what my oncologist said, I don't know if you could have survived enough medicine, tolerated enough medicine if you hadn't been so informed. Here's what happened. The one treatment when I had stage 4 kidney cancer 10 years ago that could save my life was something called high-dose interleukin-2. It's usually not used today. It's usually not used back then, but it was my only shot at it. So we decided to give it a try. But one of the things I learned from the patient community is that the side effects sometimes kill you. So I thought, okay, game on. How do I prepare for the side effects? And my oncologist said, we don't have any advice. So, okay, that's fine. So I turned to my patient community, which, by the way, my doctor had recommended. Danny Sands had steered me to this online patient community. And I got 17 firsthand stories from people who had been through the treatment. So when every side effect hit, I knew what was happening and how to work my way through it. Now, this is no guarantee that everybody would survive, but it's what worked for me. And he said it would not have happened if I hadn't been so involved. Achieving potential, the best we could achieve, happens when the most available people have the available information. Of course, good old Todd Park. I mean, I don't know how many of you remember him at the first Datapalooza, Health Datapalooza, I think back in 2012, but standing there on stage saying, Data Liberación. Get it out there. Start developing an ecosystem of apps. Now, some doctors have told me that when they were trained a long time ago, they were taught that it was their sacred responsibility to know things that patients couldn't understand. I have no objection to doctors knowing things that I can't understand. But on the other hand, there are some people who are offended if I start to know some of those things. And it's no insult to clinicians. The information I brought to my oncologist about tolerating side effects, they have published in a booklet now. So they truly partnered with me. Of course, they checked the information to make sure they agreed with it, right? But it's no insult to a clinician when a patient knows something. Do you know I think it's something like 2,000 new journal articles are published every day. Nobody can keep up with that. I asked my oncologist, I said, is that really true? And he said, yeah, most of them I don't care about, but unless you're a sub-specialist, you can't keep up with the literature. So this is my appeal. Giving us our data will enable an ecosystem of apps and workflows. Right now, I know there was a big article last year that said only 10% of people keep using their Fitbit. Indeed. Well, so this is the first Fitbit I've had that doesn't look like a nerd bracelet. It actually looks like a watch. It works for me, and I am not somebody who has ever been athletic. I only got athletic when 2.5 years ago, Dr. Sands said, not quite in this language, dude, your A1C is too high. You've become pre-diabetic. So using this and the YMCA's diabetes prevention program and a food tracker app, I lost 30 pounds in 4 months. And I've continued to be active. We know one case doesn't prove anything except that it's possible. Okay? Have you seen this? The AliveCore. This is a single lead EKG. People who have arrhythmias can check now without going to the doctor whether what they just had was AFib or VTAC or what. It's a big deal difference. I have my weight history, all kinds of things in here. And we are now finally starting to see the healthcare equivalent of Mint.com, something that goes out and gets all of this. It will not instantly cure cancer. It won't do anything, but it is the beginning of the same revolution that happens whenever any field gets computerized. So just release the data, please, and let other people work on tailoring the data to their needs. Final item of validation, the Institute of Medicine. When I started giving speeches about patient-clinician partnerships, or what we call participatory medicine, a lot of people said, well, that's fine for you, Dave, but, authority in medicine is important. If this were real, we'd be hearing about it from the authorities. Well, then the Institute of Medicine in 2012 published this report, Best Care at Lower Cost, and look what they said, a learning healthcare system needs real-time access to knowledge, digital capture of the care experience, and patient-clinician partnerships. The IOM said, engaged, empowered patients. Remember, that's e-patients, engaged, empowered, equipped, enabled. Promotes the inclusions of patients, families, and other caregivers as vital members of the team. 5 years ago, the Institute of Medicine itself. This was actually January 31st, so 3 weeks ago. New discussion paper from now it's called the National Academy of Medicine, Harnessing Evidence and Experience to Change Culture. Patient and family engaged care. So, and some of us, this guy is Stephen Keating, who is an MIT grad student when this picture was taken. He helped his doctors diagnose his brain tumor by 3D printing it because he worked at the Media Lab. And he gave me an autographed copy. And I am the sort of guy who got all my DICOM data of my tumors in my lungs. And the Dutch people were at the university where I gave my TED Talk actually 3D printed the stuff. I took this box to FedEx and they said, we can't ship organ parts. Now, sure as you're born, somebody's going to say, well, what are you going to do with this? I'm not going to bother pulling the little popcorn out. That's none of anybody's business. I got a printout of my bronchi with the tumors floating there, and it's the beginning of things. Have you seen some people now are making 3D printouts from ultrasounds? So you can have that. Some people think that's creepy, but you can have a model of the baby on the mantelpiece. And you will start to see somebody having the little kid at age 1, age 2, age 3, age 4. When the information goes digital, new things become possible. It's a wonderful thing. And just please, 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 whoever you work for and in your own life, liberate the data, let all kinds of explosively good new things happen. The most underused resource in healthcare, I completely agree with him. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. Any questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave before we wrap things up?
Like any good scientist, I'm happy to be challenged.
Thanks. Well, we're so glad you were here. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, Dave will probably be around for just a couple minutes here if you want to ask those offline, if you're shy about the crowd. But we appreciate all of you being here. We appreciate Dave. Thanks for coming and bringing your lungs with you.
One other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I talked about these jackets.
Oh, right.
You'll also see the pink socks movement. I brought a pair with me, but I'm not going to wear them every day this week. I need them tomorrow. This is a bunch of people saying we're going to rebuild healthcare from the ground up, and that means from the patient's perspective.
All right. Is the mustache on the pink socks relevant, or is that just a happy coincidence?
These are the socks of the movement, sir.
Oh, I see. Is that mustache a printout of your actual mustache?
No, sir.
No, okay. Just checking. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We're glad to have you with us. We have our next presentation at 5 o'clock, our final presentation, so we hope that you'll join us back here for that. The topic is data integrity and comparing quality metrics. So if you're here, please come back. If you are looking for a new and exciting opportunity, perhaps with Philips, we are expanding and growing all the time, and we'd love to talk to you. So Dominic and Justin are right there from our HR department. They'd love to chat with you. We have a little career fair that's happening over at the Hyatt, and we'd like to tell you about that as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.